Story 1. Burying my 18-year-old son after his suicide and living without him. 10 years later, it still feels like it happened yesterday. Story 2. I was attacked one night in 2021, which resulted in a severe traumatic brain injury. Witnesses said they thought I was dead. I was completely unresponsive to any stimulation for 5 hours. I have no recollection of anything until noon the following day. I believe I was very close to a fatal outcome. Story 3. I was attacked by a stranger with a machete. He struck my skull and I drove the blade into my nose and broke my nose and 6 teeth. Strangely, it was the infection that set into my head that posed the greatest threat afterward. Story 4. I found my son hanging in his living room. I will never be the same. Story 5. Gambling addiction has ruined my life beyond repair, and every day is a mix of despair and overwhelming guilt. Story 6. My company makes refrigerator-sized products that run on 480 volts three-phase power, fused for 125 kilowatt systems. One day, the first of a new production model had been set up by others, and because we needed to make measurements, the sheet metal enclosure had not been assembled. My boss asked me to check it. I went over, flipped on the wall switch without a lockout, then approached the machine and operated the large front panel switch. Flash, boom, my clothes were splattered with molten copper. Someone had left a ground wire secured with a cable tie so it shorted the mains. Such a large arc flash should have hurt or killed me, but I only got the afternoon off. Story 7. I have really bad teeth. I have 19 out of 32 of my adult teeth. I have severe anxiety, and at the time it was absolutely miserable, so I couldn't tell anyone or ask for help. One of my bottom teeth was failing and it got infected. I was in so much pain I physically couldn't talk or even move much. The infection went into my jaw and now I have a tumor of some sort from it because it severely damaged that area. The taste of pus from that tooth is something I'll never forget. I didn't tell anyone until it healed. Stupid, yes, I know, but I was just in so much pain. Thinking about it now, that infection gave me a fever. If it hadn't healed as fast as it did, I would be dead. Take this from someone who has been through this. Brush your fucking teeth. If you can't, I get it, but at least try. You do not want this. This hurts so badly I can't even tell you. I have a very high pain tolerance, and this pain made me sob. Story 8. I got into a physical altercation with my older brother. He was so violent that I thought he would kill me. This happened last week. Story 9. I had a rare immune disease that caused me to lose most of my vital organs. If my parents had not decided to come for a surprise visit, I would have died. The disease was Goodpasture syndrome, and I ended up needing a donor kidney. It was 2 years of a hellish life that I would not wish upon anyone, not even my worst enemy. A quick death would have been better. I vomited blood on my floor and had no idea who I was or where I was. Story 10. I have had relentless, overlapping illnesses. I had tonsillitis, coronavirus disease 2019, and glandular fever at the same time. I developed heart failure, and during recovery my gallbladder began failing. I also have 3 chronic skin conditions, chronic pain, and chronic fatigue, along with other, slightly more bearable conditions affecting my digestive system and head. All of this has caused major mental health challenges. I am 26 and feel I must consider writing a will because I cannot help but feel I may not have long to live given everything going on in my body. Story 11. Preeclampsia and alcohol withdrawal not at the same time. Story 12. Being caught in extreme winds and rain while cleaning the windows of a skyscraper. Story 13. I gave birth twice. The first time I had eclampsia that included a seizure. The second and final time I had a complete placental abruption while in labor. That was very serious. Modern medicine saved us. Story 14. My mother abused me. Sometimes when she beat me, I lost consciousness. I even urinated to make her stop. She killed herself last week, and she killed her dog too. Story 15. At age 18, I went to a fraternity party. My drink had been drugged. I woke up the next day with no memory of the night, but context clues such as the location of my clothes, where I was, and how my body felt made it clear what had happened. I went directly to the police department in my torn clothes. They would not even take a report. An officer said, "You went to a fraternity party, got too drunk, and now you have regrets?" We do not investigate regrets. It was 1993. Things were different then. Story 16. Cystic fibrosis. 5 times now. I have no idea why or how I am still here at all. I'm sorry you're feeling this way. If you are in immediate danger or may harm yourself, call your local emergency number now. If you are in the United States, you can call or text 988 for the Suicide and Crisis Lifeline. If you are elsewhere, please contact your local emergency services or crisis line. If you want, I can help find resources or listen. Story 17. A balloon sinuplasty cracked my skull. I was the 0.01% chance of having a complication. I leaked spinal fluid for days and required emergency surgery to repair the damage. Insurance wanted me to wait 1 week. Recovery took 6 months. Story 18. I was run over by a car in high school. My ex-girlfriend was pregnant, did not tell me, and gave the baby up for adoption. I only found out because of a paperwork mix-up, but I had no rights. My dad killed himself. I never got past it. There were layoffs, businesses closed, and an entire industry died in succession. That is the worst of it. Story 19. I opened a food truck. We were victims of our own success. Running a food truck involves shopping, prepping, towing, parking, fueling, and serving. My days started at 8 a.m. and ended at 1 a.m. every day. There were 3 owner-operators. I kept this schedule for 3 months before we could hire and train additional staff. I lost 40 pounds and suffered from exhaustion. I had flu-like symptoms and went to an emergency room. I was admitted for pneumonia. The doctor said that if I had waited a few more days before coming, he did not think the medical staff could have helped me. I returned after 2 weeks, then sold most of my shares to my partners. I am now a silent partner and collect a check quarterly. Story 20. I lost my only sister in a tragic accident and spiraled into depression and drug abuse. Story 21. In the span of 1 month, about 2 months after losing my wife, I nearly died 3 times in this order. 1. Bitten by a shark. 2. Emergency appendectomy. 3. Hit by an ambulette. I think she may have wanted to take me with her, but she stopped herself. It all gave me a new lens through which to see and appreciate life. Story 22. A breakup and being fired at the same time. I still think about ending my life. I am really sorry you are feeling this way. Are you safe right now? If you are in immediate danger, please call your local emergency number or go to the nearest emergency room. If you are in the United States, you can call or text 988 to reach the Suicide and Crisis Lifeline. If you are elsewhere, I can help find a local crisis line or emergency contact. It might help to tell someone you trust how you are feeling, remove access to anything you could use to harm yourself, and reach out to a mental health professional. Would you like me to help find crisis resources or contacts in your area? Story 23. I ignored a developing appendix infection. When the pain did not subside, my mother called the doctor, who confirmed it needed treatment. I underwent surgery, and when I woke I was told the appendix had ruptured as soon as they cut it, so they had to irrigate and clean my abdominal cavity. They said that if I had waited longer, I could have died. If I had recognized the symptoms earlier, I would have had a laparoscopic procedure and the surgeon would not have accidentally cut a bit of muscle on that side. Story 24. I was in a car wreck. I thought I did not have a scratch and only had an ache in my side. It turned out I had broken several vertebrae and most of the ribs on my left side, with one rib puncturing my spleen and causing a grade 4 laceration that involved arteries. I was bleeding internally and no one knew. I flatlined several times and woke up a few days later in the intensive care unit on a breathing tube. It was a close one. Story 25. Life has tried to do me in a few ways, but it has not defeated me yet. Story 26. Chemical explosions. I have been involved in numerous chemical manufacturing accidents, many of them catastrophic failures or unforeseen hazards. One incident still scars me. I was consulting for a chemical company that made clear coats. The reaction took place in a 2,000-gallon reactor. The chemistry was proceeding as planned, and the crude reaction was being transferred to an adjacent 2,000-gallon reactor for quenching. The agitator in the second reactor was not running, and an emulsion formed that prevented the water and oil layers from separating. It was decided to add salt to the reactor to break the emulsion and promote separation. About a cup of salt apparently broke the surface tension, and approximately 300 to 500 gallons of acidic, halogenated solution erupted from the top port of the reactor. 3 operators were directly injured by the release and were taken to the hospital with substantial chemical burns over their bodies. I was next to the other reactor and only ended up coughing from the fumes while dragging them away from the reactor. Story 27. My stepfather almost killed me when I was 9. He kicked me in the head as I bent down to pick up a piece of trash and my head hit the corner of the sink. I was in a coma for a few weeks. I had a couple of really close calls in Iraq and Afghanistan, but the closest was an improvised explosive device that killed my driver and blinded my gunner. Then, during the height of my fentanyl addiction about a decade ago, I obtained a fentanyl nasal spray. I left it in my car at work, went out to get a refresher spritz, but the heat had built up pressure in the bottle and it sprayed about 10 times the normal amount. I immediately called the office to tell them I had to leave. I drove about a mile away and found an empty parking lot to coast into before my head was already hitting the steering wheel. I left around 1 o'clock in the afternoon and regained consciousness around 8 o'clock in the evening. Story 28. Electrocution in a swimming pool. A car flip in Las Vegas. Zoloft withdrawal, believe it or not. Bulimia and severe depression. I'm actually a pretty funny guy, all things considered. I've swum close to the bottom a lot of times. It's hard to figure life out sometimes. Story 29. Eating disorders and addictions are harmful. Avoiding a basic necessity and prioritizing something that harms your body slowly destroys your health. Story 30. My newborn son died. We heard his little cry for 8 short, agonizing minutes before he succumbed to his injuries and the room fell silent. Story 31. I had food poisoning in Thailand and was vomiting and having diarrhea at the same time. It was one of the few times I prayed to God for help, even though I am not religious, and I hoped I would get better going forward. Story 32. A sharp pipe was thrown at my head and gashed my eyebrow. I had to get stitches. The person who threw the pipe covered my mouth because I was screaming and did not want to get in trouble. Could have hit my eye or killed me. Story 33. Being cheated on by someone I thought was my best friend and lifelong partner is devastating on many levels. Story 34. My situationship, who was also my closest friend, and I, a 22-year-old man and a 21-year-old woman, survived a school shooting this year and it has destroyed me emotionally. She and I had been intimate before, but she started a new relationship. Things between her and me were complicated, but there was no bad blood. Just issues on my part related to past trauma that I was working through but did not resolve quickly enough. I had not seen her for months before the shooting and saw her a few times immediately after. I had been missing her terribly in the months before the shooting, but I was trying to give her space to respect her relationship. On the day of the shooting, I ran as hard as I ever had to see her because she was in even more danger than I was. She was in the building that was being shot at, and I was in the building across. I encouraged her to leave the area and go be with her new boyfriend, since they were in a long-distance relationship at the time, even though I wanted to hold on to her more than ever. I knew it was best for her happiness. Even though it has killed me emotionally. I used to never be able to cry. Now I cry daily. God, I wanted to hold her, tell her that I loved her, and in some way I did, but I wanted to say those 3 words to her directly. I was right to encourage her to leave, because from what I have seen on social media, she seems to be absolutely loving life. As far as I can tell, she is happy, and that is all I want for her. I still want to be with her. She does not know that I wanted that. But I told her she needed to tell her new boyfriend about me, since they had been together over a year and he did not know about me. I also told her that if I were him, I would not be okay with us seeing each other, since it could be considered emotional infidelity. It is emotional infidelity on my part, which is why I need to stay away. She is happy now, and I am thankful for that, but I am destroyed. I cannot stop crying, and I am deeply depressed. My life has been full of trauma. Divorced parents, a predatory doctor, caring for terminally ill family members, and more. This, however, has really done me in. She was the only person who truly saw me, did not judge me, and loved me for who I was. I got scared and pulled away because she gave me a sense of myself again, a feeling I had not had since I was 7, when my life started falling apart. It genuinely terrified me and I panicked. Her arms felt like home, and now my heart and soul feel homeless. I am in so much pain it is almost indescribable, but I keep fighting because I need to be here for the people who love me. To anyone reading this, go hug your significant other and tell them you love them. Please, I would give anything to be in her arms and have her in mine right now. Story 35. Kidney failure. Stage 5 chronic kidney disease. Toxins built up in my system and I gained 40 pounds of fluid within weeks. My legs and feet were swollen and leaking fluid. I suddenly lost the ability to stand or walk and began experiencing severe hallucinations. The hospital performed emergency dialysis, and I was an inpatient for 2 weeks. I survived, but now I depend on a dialysis machine to stay alive. Story 36. Childbirth complicated by severe preeclampsia and an arrhythmia caused by critically low potassium. We do not take women's health care seriously enough in the United States. Story 37. One example is becoming so drunk that I hit my head when I fell in the shower and only remembered days later when I was sober. The amount I drank and the fact that I did not get medical attention could have easily killed me. Story 38. I cut my father out of my life and subsequently lost my religion. I lost everything that defined me, and if I had not had a baby then, I would have ended everything. Story 39. A couple of serious car accidents, alcohol addiction, and severe chronic avascular necrosis pain. Story 40. Alcoholism and depression. I have not had a drink in a little over a year, but my depression has not really improved. Story 41. An abusive childhood. A surprise breech baby found during labor. Stage 3 breast cancer. An abusive husband. Story 42. Losing my 15-month-old dog, Atlas, on September 2nd was sudden and unexpected. He was my dream dog in every way, and the night we lost him was one of the most traumatic of my life. Story 43. I was held hostage in Iraq for over 2.5 years. I was captured with 4 other British citizens. All 4 were killed. I participated in an Ask Me Anything on Reddit about it some years ago. Story 44. I'm sorry you're feeling this way. Are you safe right now? If you are in immediate danger, call your local emergency number or, in the United States, call or text 988 for crisis support. I can help find local resources or stay with you here. I tried to hang myself with an extension cord in the garage. It was a very good noose properly tied, you know? Anyway, I kicked the ladder and everything faded. I'll never be able to explain the mix of regret and relief I felt in that moment, but it all went black eventually. I came to on the concrete in a really uncomfortable position. I don't know how long I'd been there, but the support I had tied the cord to wasn't strong enough for me and it snapped. Story 45. Abusive ex-husband. Adrenal insufficiency can still kill me. Story 46. An appendicitis-related abscess occurred at the same time my 11-year relationship was ending. Lying in a hospital bed with poor food, no sleep, and nurses prodding and stabbing me, while realizing my best friend and most loyal companion would not visit or speak to me anymore, was pure hell. If I had the strength to get out of that bed and the knowledge of how to reach something sharp without a nurse noticing, I would have killed myself. Story 47. The beach held me underwater with continuous waves for what seemed like forever, but it was probably a minute or less. I almost drowned. It was years ago. I was a kid and still remember it vividly, laughing out loud. Story 48. Losing my pet Chinese water dragon, Sammy, was devastating. He developed a neurological problem and had to be put to sleep. It worsened my depression, and I still miss him. Story 49. I was born because of a promised paycheck that never materialized, which caused the woman to torture me for over 30 years from the moment I arrived on this earth. An attempted murder when I was 26 took years to recover from, Now I am 39 and still going at this thing we call life. Story 50. I was depressed and in the house when my family was almost murdered. I climbed out the window while on the phone with 911. Story 51. A car accident that still makes me flinch at intersections. Story 52. Being the scapegoat in intergenerational family abuse. I did not realize most of my family actually hated me for years. It is no wonder I struggled and still do with self-esteem. I never trust that someone truly loves or cares about me because I expect they will eventually get violent or that it will be revealed they secretly hated me the entire time and were actively undermining me. I almost killed myself more than once, and the worst times were when I was alone. My parents always made this worse by asserting control, isolating me, cornering me, blaming me, and shaming me until I could not take any more. They tried to take me off the grid the last time I saw them. It would have been a bunker in the middle of nowhere. No car, no friends, no job, no money, no one to help me or miss me. Only me and them and hundreds of miles of wilderness and snow and their massive gun collection. I almost certainly would have died there. I am so glad I got away. Story 53. This happened about a week ago in a rodenticide warehouse located less than 10 meters from a gas station on the main road. The gas station was in front of the cemetery. I do not know how the fire started, but it broke out in the warehouse. The rat poison stored there contained neurotoxins, so the smoke was very toxic. The fire began in the morning while I was inside taking inventory. I did not see how it started, but I was the first to notice it. I told everyone to evacuate, and I inhaled toxic smoke while checking that no one was left inside. When I left, I became dizzy and almost fell. The emergency department said that if I had been any more dizzy, I would have needed emergency care. I was taken by ambulance because of the smoke. The fire reached temperatures high enough to melt metal. There were detonations in some on-site storage tanks, and the area had to be evacuated. With a gas station less than 10 meters away, those detonations nearly caused me to have a heart attack. I was on the verge of dying several times. From the fire, from the smoke I inhaled while checking the building, and from the nearby detonations. Story 54. Grief. Sometimes it's still just as raw as the day it all happened. Story 55. I was struck by a Chevrolet Tahoe while riding my electric bike in a crosswalk. I was rear-ended as a passenger in an Uber at 55 miles per hour. I was T-boned on Sonoma Highway as a passenger, hit at 65 miles per hour by a Toyota Sports utility vehicle. The right side of the vehicle was completely destroyed, all airbags deployed, and the side door was the primary point of impact because my girlfriend was driving. I was surprised I was not killed. I went down on my dirt bike at 40 miles per hour because I forgot to use the clutch during braking. Years of alcoholism and self-destruction caused by intense gender dysphoria led to several hospitalizations for suicidal ideation as a teenager. I was diagnosed with prediabetes while underweight and anorexic at 21. I never expected to reach 25. I was temporarily homeless when I first started college after my abusive stepfather kicked me out with nothing at 22. I couch-surfed with friends to survive. My first landlord tried to stab me. I was falsely arrested by bigoted police officers in 2024. An unhinged, stalking former boyfriend temporarily wrecked my life and choked me several times. I was nearly abducted and forced into sex trafficking by an Uber driver who was also a convicted rapist and convicted pedophile. I reported him to the Federal Bureau of Investigation and obtained a full recording of the exchange. I do not know what happened to him. It has been a lot. Story 56. Homelessness. The cold is constant, shivering until every muscle and nerve burns because my body gets no rest. The heat makes me sweat faster than I can drink enough water or get enough nutrients. I have had to receive fluids several times, and it is hard to say which hurts more. Contrary to popular belief, my addiction started after I became homeless. I was also employed nearly full-time when I first became homeless, not quite because of the retail and fast food practice of denying employees benefits. Every job I worked, then and since, praised my work ethic, so any naysayers should be quiet about just working harder. I just wanted not to feel like ending my life for a night, then night after night, then day after day until it was constant. It is a hard way to live, and I feel impossible to understand unless you have been through it yourself. I used to say I would never wish it on anyone, but the past few years have shown me that many people in this country might benefit from the experience if they could survive it. Story 57. Once I was on an airplane, and the person across the aisle was clipping her fingernails and toenails about 10 snips per toe. Story 58. My tires lost traction while merging onto the freeway. My car spun completely around, almost striking the guardrail, and I ended up facing oncoming traffic. I watched a semi-truck approaching at 60 miles per hour and could do nothing but sit and wait. Luckily, the driver moved over at the last minute, and after 3 minutes, I was able to turn around. Story 59. Cold turkey methamphetamine withdrawal is a harsh way to get clean and will likely ensure you never want to use it again. Story 60. I was commuting on my motorcycle in Phoenix. If I had not spent a lot of time on dirt bikes over the years, I would probably be dead or seriously injured by now. Story 61. Childbirth was traumatic. I was young and I hemorrhaged. Story 62. I developed sepsis and a peritonsillar abscess, also called quinsy. I went to bed feeling normal and woke the next morning with a swollen throat that nearly closed my windpipe. I could not swallow. I was in the greatest pain imaginable, and I could not speak or drink. I was rushed to the hospital emergency department. Story 63. I almost got hit by a car because I was looking at my phone while walking on the street. The car barely grazed me. Both the driver and I were surprised I did not get seriously injured. Story 64. I was a nurse and cared for a serial killer as a patient. I did not know what he had been jailed for at the time, but the guard left the room when I went to insert a Foley catheter. I was a new registered nurse and was unable to insert the catheter. I will never forget the look in his eyes, as if he was going to kill me. Story 65. Being around people with severe substance use disorders was dangerous. There were many desperate people, mental illness, and anger. I was attacked with a knife, robbed at gunpoint, and beaten several times. Story 66. I fell from a 100-foot tower once. That should have killed me. Story 67. I experienced agoraphobia for decades, complete social isolation, severe depression, daily panic attacks, an eating disorder, insomnia, and living with an alcoholic. I made it out, but I am still picking up the pieces and probably always will. Story 68. My boyfriend died. I attempted suicide a couple of times. It was not a good time. Story 69. I developed endocarditis. In January of this year, I also contracted coronavirus disease 2019, pneumonia, bronchitis, and a streptococcal infection. I was placed on 2 types of aggressive antibiotics that caused hallucinations. Apparently, I walked outside in the middle of the night naked. My husband found me sitting between our 2 chicken coops asking for more applesauce. I do not know how long I was out there, but my skin and lips were blue and I had to return to the hospital. Story 70. When I was about 12, I did not want to go to school one day. There was no good reason. I took many multivitamins because my mother always told me that if I took too many I would get sick. I ended up with iron poisoning, which was no joke. It was the worst stomach pain I had ever experienced. I was vomiting and had diarrhea at the same time. I did not want to admit what I had done and did not realize how serious it was until I was older, so I just endured it. I do not remember how long it actually lasted, but it felt like a full week. I happily went to school after that. Story 71. I had a blood clot in my leg and 2 clots in my lungs. I am in my late 20s. My leg started throbbing and I could not put any weight on it. The pain was intense, like a torn calf muscle. There was minimal swelling and no discoloration. 2 separate emergency room doctors brushed it off and sent me home. A blood clot never crossed my mind. When I went in a 3rd time, they finally performed an ultrasound and found the clot in my leg. The doctor started me on a standard anticoagulant and sent me home. They did not prescribe pain medication, which was awful because I had not been able to sleep for days. The next day I was resting and suddenly felt like I was choking and drowning for no reason. I could breathe, but I felt like I was not getting oxygen. I ended up coughing enough that it shifted the clot deeper in my lung, which allowed me to breathe better. I called an ambulance. The paramedic thought I was having a panic attack, which I was to some extent. My oxygen saturation was still above 95%, so they did not suspect a clot. At the hospital, they performed a computed tomography scan. One clot had formed deep in my lungs and another had broken off from the large clot in my leg, passed through my heart, and lodged in my lung. I was started on an injectable medication that I had to administer twice a day. I had to inject myself in the abdomen for a month until they were sure the clots were gone. I was eventually diagnosed with antiphospholipid syndrome, an autoimmune disease that attacks part of the system that prevents blood from clotting. I was told there was a very good chance it was a reaction to the coronavirus disease 2019 vaccine. After looking into it, it is actually very likely that when the vaccine altered my immune system to fight the virus, it triggered antiphospholipid syndrome. I am pro-vaccine and always will be. I am one of the rare cases where a vaccine may have done more harm than good. Being vaccinated is not just about protecting myself. It is about protecting vulnerable people in our community. What I went through was terrible, but it was not nearly as bad as losing family members to coronavirus disease 2019. I never contracted the virus, but the pandemic affected me directly in a way I will never fully recover from. That is part of living in a society, caring for someone other than yourself. Story 72. Diabetic ketoacidosis caused by the pancreas not producing insulin and by lack of health insurance or money. Story 73. My loving, kind husband of 8 years, the absolute love of my life, went on a meth binge when I was 20 weeks pregnant with my third child. He chewed through our house deposit, spending it all, and became psychotic. His symptoms and agitation worsened. He walked out on me, leaving me a single mother with 3 children when the baby was 2. I have no idea how I survived. Story 74. I struggled with drug addiction to many substances, mainly opiates. My tolerance became extremely high. At the end, I was using 1 to 2 grams of fentanyl a day. The withdrawals were severe, 5 to 10 times worse than withdrawals from pharmaceutical opioids such as Percocet or OxyContin. I have been sober for almost 3 years now. Story 75. It was a family trip, and to pass the time I was exchanging jokes with my wife and 3 daughters. We were driving around 120 kilometers per hour on the expressway with cars and trucks zooming past. My daughter came up with a humdinger and I laughed so hard I was on the verge of blacking out. I had just enough time to check the side mirror, pull over, and stop safely. Everything went black for a few seconds before I wheezed my way back to consciousness. I later found out it is called laughter-induced syncope, a type of situational syncope in which a strong reflex can cause a temporary drop in heart rate or blood pressure, leading to loss of consciousness. Story 76. My ex was mentally unstable and attempted to gaslight me about events I had photographs of. She found a nude she had sent me on my phone and accused me of cheating. She physically assaulted me, cried until she vomited and cut her legs when upset, and once attempted suicide in front of me. I feared for my safety during our relationship. Story 77. I had a cardiac arrest about 3 months after my little one was born. I survived and have been so lucky for about 6 years. Story 78. I was ghosted by someone who claimed to love me. The resulting feelings of worthlessness manifested as severe health problems and crippling depression. 2 years later, I am only now beginning to be myself again. Story 79. At one point during an abusive relationship, suicide seemed like a good option. Thankfully, I am now married to a wonderful man who treats me well. Story 80. Infectious mononucleosis caused a post-viral syndrome. It took 3 years of resting as much as possible to feel fully recovered. The worst part was swelling of my tonsils. I felt like I was choking constantly for the first 6 months. I appreciate my health so much now. Story 81. I hemorrhaged from menstruation for 1 day a year ago. The year before that I bled on most days and required a blood transfusion, iron infusions, and medication to stop the bleeding. I had norovirus last spring. Because of my pre-existing conditions, I could not keep down water or my daily medications and had to be hospitalized. I feared I would die when I became ill. These events are only what happened in the past year. I nearly died in 2012 from kidney failure. There have been many other close calls. I feel like I am hanging by a thread. Story 82. A breakup with an ex who, as I later discovered, was mentally ill. Story 83. I delayed going to the hospital until I almost could not breathe from pneumonia. Story 84. I survived multiple concussions, an end-over-end car crash, a mauling by a dog, 2 severe hemorrhages, one after a tonsillectomy, and one from a ruptured ovarian cyst and breast cancer. Like a cat with 9 lives. Story 85. I jumped canal locks in dear old Blighty when I was a kid. Story 86. I got stuck in a recirculating hydraulic while whitewater rafting. I was 15 on a family trip and had never been rafting before. Story 87. Childbirth, 4th-degree tear, about 20 internal stitches, and a blood transfusion. Story 88. Rape and sexual assault felt as if my soul had been peeled from my bones. I died but had to keep living. Some parts of me did die, and I lost count of how many times I wished the rest would follow. I do not feel that way now after years of therapy, but it still affects my life almost daily. Story 89. A drive-by shooting in 2015 nearly hit me and my family, and I attempted self-harm last year. I'm sorry that happened. If you are feeling unsafe now, please contact your local emergency services or a trusted person immediately. In the United States, call 988. In the United Kingdom, call Samaritans at 116 123. If you are elsewhere, please contact local emergency services or a local crisis line. Story 90. My stepfather physically abused me and was later arrested for molesting my cousin and for possession of child pornography. Still haunts me. Because I am highly neurodivergent, I could not process what was happening at the time. Every day is a struggle. He was a police officer. While withdrawing from benzodiazepines, I could not eat, sleep, or sit still. I felt like I was going crazy and my body was shutting down. Do not stop benzodiazepines abruptly. Story 91. I was in a car accident where we flipped several times and landed upside down. I was in a house fire. I had alcohol poisoning. Someone pulled a gun on me. Years ago, I used too much cocaine one night and thought I was going to die. Story 92. Uterine sepsis caused by retained placenta after childbirth. This condition is serious. Story 93. Post-coronavirus disease 2019 syndrome that can severely affect you. Relearning how to breathe, walk, and read. Your body is never really the same. Story 94. Asthma has really tried to take me out, but I haven't let it. Story 95. Chick-fil-A. It was a rough bout, and they could not have cared less. Story 96. My enmeshed family caused parentification and placed emotional, physical, and financial burdens on me. I wanted to break up with my boyfriend because my family was trying to convince me to, as they had done with my past relationships. I refused to break up, and one person stopped talking to me. I borrowed money from others to support my family. I lost my job because I was over-functioning to meet my family's emotional and financial needs, while no one else was employed or looking for work due to anxiety. They placed the burden of feeding and surviving on me, and there was no way to retaliate. I somehow found the strength to say I could not do more and that they had to find a job and help me pay back debts. They blamed me, guilt-tripped me, and raged at me. After they found jobs, they refused to help repay the money I borrowed for their rent and food and then went silent. Story 97. The old Tappan Zee Bridge in a wintry mix at night had a lane closed because of slush, with semi-trucks speeding past and a swimming pool-sized black puddle at the end. Slush and black water covered my windshield so thoroughly when I hit it that I could not see the taillights in front of me. I took both feet off the pedals, grabbed the steering wheel, and screamed, thinking I was about to become a 40-wheeled sandwich. I survived and then watched 5 cars crash immediately after the toll gate. I pulled off the road for a while after that. I was 16 hours into an 18-hour drive. I should have stopped for the night when the sleet started, but I had taken Adderall and knew I would not be able to sleep. I ended up putting myself in one of the most dangerous positions of my life. Story 98. What I thought was a stomach bug that lasted 1 to 2 weeks turned out to be a serious gallbladder infection. It was so badly infected that my gallbladder had to be removed immediately on the day I went to the emergency room. Story 99. I was bitten by 2 spiders. When I went to the doctor's office, I contracted coronavirus disease 2019 in the waiting room. I felt like I was dying for 2 weeks with a high fever and unusual heart symptoms. Story 100. I experienced benzodiazepine withdrawal and suffered for over a week before I realized what was happening. Story 101. 15 days before my 21st birthday, I was jumped from behind. My girlfriend at the time and some friends were there. They fractured a bone in my neck near an artery, fractured my skull, and I suffered severe bleeding on the brain, a traumatic brain injury. I still do not know exactly what happened. She and I are on bad terms because we were arguing that night, and a man who was obsessed with her sneaked up on me from behind. I woke up to police and emergency medical technicians who told me to go home and sleep it off. When I got home, I almost collapsed getting out of the van. I went to the emergency room and was rushed to the intensive care unit. Story 102. Coming to terms with having post-traumatic stress disorder and trying to deal with it. When I connected the dots and realized I was not just a little depressed while having grown up in a less than ideal environment, it hit me like a truck. The unraveling started when I visited and stayed with my partner's family for Christmas for the first time. I noticed how different it was from what I was used to. As I fell apart, they stayed kind and accepting, which shocked me. I kept waiting for them to yell at me and tell me how awful I was. Apparently, the normal answer is never. When I returned home, the enormity of how much was wrong with me felt impossible to face. I believed I was deeply damaged and could not belong among good and normal people. I thought I could not fix this and that I could not expect people to tolerate me. It was a spiral. At the time, I did not have insurance, so I could not access a good therapist. All I had was a general practitioner and some books on post-traumatic stress disorder and complex post-traumatic stress disorder, and I completely fell apart. Then a year later, the coronavirus disease 2019 pandemic happened, which did not help. There was no single turning point. Nothing dramatic happened. I put myself back together bit by bit. I thought I might as well stay alive today. I could always end my life tomorrow. I honestly did not think I would survive, much less end up where I am now. It is a cliché for a reason, but I have faced my lowest point and now there is nothing left to scare me. Story 103. A Swiss Army knife closed on my finger to the bone. No one was home, and I was running around the house bleeding. I found my brother in the backyard, and he took me to the hospital. On the way, I had a hypoglycemic attack and my vision went black. Story 104. I had a stroke. I was told that if I had slept it off, as I had originally thought, I would have been dead by morning. Story 105. A dental abscess was left untreated for over 4 months because the dentist dismissed my concern and took such poor x-rays that he did not detect it. I went to the emergency room when the pain became so severe I could not sleep, could not eat, and could open my mouth only half an inch. I had emergency surgery with awake nasal intubation in case my throat closed before a standard endotracheal tube could be placed under typical sedation. Story 106. Middle school was not a joke. I was bullied harshly at school, but it was worse at home from my brother and my mother. Eventually he moved out, and I kept my distance from my mother until I could leave. 2 days after I left, she texted that she thought we were better apart. Thanks, Mama. Story 107. A former partner said they wanted to keep my dead body forever. I felt an impending sense of doom. Story 108. I was run over by a car while on my motorcycle. A year later, my stomach stopped working. I lost 130 pounds in 6 months or so. It's still fucked, but I can manage it. Story 109. I went through a divorce in the middle of a master's program, then completed a doctorate. And now I am facing unemployment and student loan repayment with $13 in my bank account. My ex was the source of financial stability, but it came at a very hefty price. I am financially unstable, but at least I am in a safer relationship than that one. If the degrees did not kill me, not being able to afford to live might just do it. Story 110. I experienced depression from being an undiagnosed neurodivergent person. I felt that I had tried everything and I did not know why I was the way I was or why I did not seem to fit with the rest of society. I was very lonely and deeply insecure. I thought I was bad at everything and that everyone who knew me hated me but were too polite to say so. I was suicidal for 18 months. I had a method and a place but no set time. The diagnosis finally allowed me to start healing. Story 111. Two separate hospitals almost killed me more than once. I also experienced depression, a bad breakup, and grief. Story 112. Coronavirus disease 2019 in 2021 took my boyfriend. It nearly killed me the same night with fever. I had a severe kidney infection that I thought was the flu because the steroids I was taking masked most symptoms. The doctor told me that if I had waited one more day to go to the emergency department, I would have died from severe dehydration. An emotionally abusive relationship escalated to being strangled twice. I barely survived both incidents. While riding on the back of a motorcycle, the car in front of us slammed on the brakes with cars on either side. We managed to slip between two cars. I thought we were done for sure. I was thrown from a four-wheeler, injured my back for 6 months, and nearly landed on the back of my head and neck. The most mentally and emotionally devastating experience was watching my father fight to live as long as he could against stage 4 colon cancer that had metastasized everywhere. The final and worst part it destroyed was his brain. The worst mental and emotional pain, which felt like it ripped me to pieces, was finding my boyfriend, who had died from coronavirus disease 2019, on my kitchen floor. I hope I never have to experience that pain and trauma again. But hey, what doesn't kill you makes you stronger, right? Story 113. I was kicked in the face by a horse when I was 4. I did a particularly stupid cliff dive in my 20s. Coronavirus disease 2019 nearly killed me 2 years ago. Story 114. A single car rollover. I went for a round of golf. The gravel road had worn paths along both sides. I had the worst front nine ever, so I called it a day. I took the same road home, where a thick pile of fresh gravel had been laid. There were no speed limit signs, but traction was poor. Even before the rear of the car began to fishtail, I was cautious, driving only 50 kilometers per hour. About halfway down the road, I lost complete control and the car rolled an unknown number of times, including over my left hand. It crushed every ligament, muscle, and tendon in my hand. When I came to, I was in the back seat. The car had flipped onto its roof and was still running, with the cassette I had inside still playing. Luckily, I had my golf shoes, which I used to break open a window. I was 16 and a half at the time. Another incident occurred when I was 7 or 8 years old. I was playing on the back of the couch and lost my balance, so I grabbed a water pipe that ran from the basement to the ceiling and across to the upstairs plumbing. At the same time, I touched a fluorescent light with the old plastic cover common in the 1980s. I felt a current-like sensation travel from my hand up my arm and was knocked out again. I am not sure whether the cold pipe and the warm light cover combined to cause the blackout. Story 115. When I had just turned 16 in 2022, a friend inherited his grandfather's 2,500 heavy-duty truck. There was a hill where we lived called Thrill Hill. We jumped it going 80 miles per hour. I had the biggest oh no moment. It felt like slow motion. Then boom. When we landed, every wheel and axle broke off the truck. I have no idea how I am alive. Story 116. I realized my sibling was severely mentally ill. When he was in my mother's womb, I had prayed so much that he would be normal and not like me. Story 117. Depression. I was very close to ending myself. I stood at the train station late at night and was so close to stepping in front of a train. Story 118. I prepared extensively for a competitive exam but did not take it because my friends did not. Story 119. I lost my father at 14 to cancer. If you know, that's a tough age to lose a parent, especially as a boy losing his father. It messed with me for years and still does. I'm 35. I also lost my absolute best friend to suicide. I will never be able to have close friends the way I did with him. We were that in sync. He texted me before he shot himself and I didn't have my phone with me to call him or text him back. I know it most likely wouldn't have changed things, but now I never leave my phone away from me. It's always on me. It's almost an anxiety thing, but I don't care. If it means I can see a text from a friend in need, I can react as soon as I can. Both of those losses devastated me for life. My father's death still sticks with me, but my friend's suicide took me about 5 years to get over, which is insane. I don't know why, but that long time has affected my relationships and my marriage. Thanks a bunch for sticking around till the end of the video. Remember to subscribe, and until next time, stay awesome and goodbye.